From under the Christmas tree, the Magyar's birds wiped out the occupiers' special forces. Putin's New Year's nightmare. The GUAR and SBU turned the holiday into chaos. Storm, Shadows, and Neptunes are burning down Russia's oil refineries and ports. Panic is engulfing the Russian Federation. Factories are burning, sirens are wailing. Air defense can't save them. Strike after strike, Ukraine strikes deep and with precision. Even Russians are shocked and applauding. The Kremlin is in hysteria. Minus generals, minus fleet, minus security. A sensation. Zelenskyy announced a breakthrough. Ukrainian missiles have become super accurate. Ukraine is preparing its own HIMARS, a weapon that chills the blood in Moscow. Russia is burning from within. Terrorist attacks, underground resistance, and fear. The regime is coming apart at the seams. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Hello, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko, and here are the latest events. New Year's gifts for the occupiers. Magyar's birds gave the Russian main intelligence directorate's special forces quite a pecking.
More than 120 soldiers from the 14th Special Forces Brigade of the GRU Rasengray were eliminated and wounded as a result of a planned operation carried out on the night of December 26th in the settlement of Berdyansk, temporarily occupied territory of Donetsk region, according to confirmed operational information. As a result of
the reconnaissance strike operation against the command post and locations of the occupiers' personnel, the losses amounted to 51 killed, 200 wounded, and 74 seriously injured. And yet another successful operation by our defenders. As part of the mission, GUAR aviation was deployed to quickly transfer airborne troops to a strategically important section of the front in Pokrovsk, which allowed the unit to strengthen its positions. Aerial reconnaissance specialists and FPV drone operators played the key role in accomplishing the task, as they detected and neutralized the Russian invaders, according to the GUR. Daring maneuvers by FPV masters, precise drops from heavy bombers, strikes on the occupiers with mortars, special forces at work on the battlefield, evacuation of the wounded from the skill zone, atmospheric moments, tension and adrenaline during the fight for Ukraine's freedom. Watch right now. Christmas also turned into a fiery hell for Russia. Ukraine delivered a series of precise strikes. Oil storage tanks burned in the port of Temryuk. The gas processing plant in Orenburg was shut down. Storm shadow alerts are sweeping across all regions of Russia. Storms and Neptunes hit their targets without fail. Refineries, air defense systems in Crimea, and key infrastructure are under attack. Even Russians admitted in the comments. Ukrainians are doing great. In particular, the security service of Ukraine struck oil storage tanks in the port of Temryuk and a gas processing plant in Orenburg. 2 oil product storage tanks were on fire at the port, and as a result of the strike on the plant, gas ignited in the pipeline. The technological process at the facility was suspended. Shit. Sorry for the language. Meanwhile, in Russia, missile alerts for Storm Shadow cruise missiles are sounding more and more frequently.
So, friends, we're out for a walk. We went out for a walk. It's still booming. Well, we had a missile alert. Well, I've already been sent the video. Can't post it. But you can see it there. You look at it. It's smoking. In Novoshaktinsk. It's clear where it is. There are helicopters flying around. A plane flew by. In short, everyone gets it. And that's precisely that. That's exactly how they managed to sneak in, completely undercover, just like they did the very last time. And from the station, I went out for cigarettes. Well, yeah. I really don't know, perhaps 10, maybe even more than that. Let's go for a walk.
Notably, even Russians are giving compliments to the Ukrainian armed forces. Handsome guys, that's right. Locals are commenting on the strikes at the oil refinery in Novoshaktinsk, Rostov region.
Looks like it's the NZNP again. Tongues of flame. Well, you can't see them now. Handsome.
The storms hit their target exactly.
It's a good day in Novoshaktinsk. There were a total of 6 distinct and powerful explosions that occurred. This number of detonations is highly unusual and certainly not within the realm of normal occurrences for this particular situation, raising significant concerns about the underlying cause and potential impact.
The Neptunes also hurried to congratulate the occupiers on the holiday in temporarily occupied Crimea. Notably, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that the use of Ukrainian missiles is becoming more effective each time.
The accuracy rate of the Flamingo has now improved. In the last use, they fired 5 missiles. 1 destroyed the target, 4 were shot down by Russian air defense. All of this is getting stronger in the process. Every month.
Zelenskyy also added that the hit rate of the Neptunes has become
very good.
The president of Ukraine noted that another missile, Ruta, is being produced in cooperation with
our valued, trusted, and essential partners, who are absolutely crucial to our continued success. And
one more sensation, Ukraine is creating its own analogue of the HIMARS system. It will be a single universal platform for launching various types of missiles. Domestic specialists are already working on this new development. This was reported by Colonel Andriy Zhuravlev. The system is currently in the development stage, and it is expected to be a single universal platform for launching various types of munitions. No other details about the system have been made public. According to experts, the development of a HIMARS analog is driven by Ukraine's desire to reduce its dependence on the American defense industry. Experts suggest that the domestic system will be built on a European chassis. Theoretically, the system could be used not only to launch rockets and missiles, but also drones. But that's not all. Recently, the Russians have lost 2 generals. In addition, for several weeks now, Russia's shadow fleet has been suffering from attacks. Watch the fiery details right now.
On December 22nd, around 7 a.m., a car exploded in a courtyard in southern Moscow. By about 9 a.m., it became known that Lieutenant General Fanil Sarvarov of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces was killed in the car explosion. This is already the second news of a Russian general's death in the past week. So, as expected, Russian propaganda is starting to drown in complaints against the authorities.
About the general who was blown up in Moscow. I've already lost count of how many have been blown up on the streets of the capital or St. Petersburg. The number is high. Obviously, a whole special operation was planned and they approached it with real intelligence.
Ukraine has not officially confirmed its involvement in the death, Zarvarova. However, journalists from the publication Bild suggest that this is the work of the Ukrainian special services. And if the Ukrainians are behind the general's murder, then the intention may be to destabilize the Russian general staff and society.
The message is this: we will get to all of you, and for all Russians, we can bring the war to Moscow at any moment. Such assassination attempts, in addition to the targeted killing of an officer who was responsible at the highest level for training highly qualified military personnel, have several other effects. Destabilization among Kremlin officials, the breakdown within Russian society, and a signal that Russians will gain nothing by trying to establish relations only with the Americans while leaving the Ukrainians out.
A few days earlier, during another attack on a Russian Shadow Fleet tanker in the Mediterranean Sea, Russian General Andrei Avaryanov was likely killed.
Avaryanov is responsible for shadow deals, assassinations, explosions, espionage in EU countries, sabotage, and so on. He is also behind the downing of Prigozhin's plane, the poisoning of the Skripals, and so on. He carried out operations abroad on Putin's orders. He moved around the EU on vessels of the Shadow Fleet.
Russia has still neither confirmed nor denied the information about Avaryanov's death. And while the information about Avaryanov's elimination still needs confirmation, when it comes to the so-called elimination of Russian Shadow Fleet tankers, everything is self-evident. The Kremlin, meanwhile, claims that Kiev's attacks on oil tankers will not achieve any results and will not disrupt supplies.
This will not lead to the expected result, after all. It will not disrupt any of the supplies in any way, after all. It will only create an additional threat. There will definitely be responses from our side.
At the same time, the real consequences of these attacks exist, have existed, and as they say, will continue to exist.
What does this achieve? Well, first of all, it significantly reduces the capabilities of the Russian Shadow Fleet to transport and export raw materials, namely oil. This means a reduction accordingly in the flow of petrodollars into the budget, real currency that is then directed specifically toward the war against Ukraine. The Russian Shadow Fleet is no longer operating as efficiently as it did, for example, a year ago.
In addition, attacks on Russia's Shadow Fleet are also a reputational blow to Russia.
But there is also a reputational aspect to it. Why is everyone so worked up about Russia? Because this reputational aspect is connected to the fact that never, during the existence of the Soviet Union or the Russian Empire, did anything like this happen, where its fleet was humiliated across several seas. In this way,
no less painful, particularly in terms of reputation, is the blow to Russians. The attacks on airfields deep in the rear.
Enemy Su-30 and Su-27 fighter jets were hit. Video and details of the unique GWAR operation in Lipetsk. The SBU struck 2 Russian Su-27 aircraft at the Belbek airfield.
So, if you look at reality, things aren't exactly going well for the Russians. But if you deny this reality, then losing generals is no big deal, and the loss of the Shadow Fleet won't disrupt supplies or lead to any consequences.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Shock terror attacks are engulfing Russia. 2026 could be decisive. The threat is exploding inside the country. The FSB is running around in panic. There's a real explosion in Bashkortostan. The whole republic is in an uproar. Classified documents are already on the FSB chief's desk. Moscow and the major cities are in mortal danger. Should Russia expect another Crocus Hole or something even more terrifying? Watch this. These are the images now being actively broadcast on Russian television. They show FSB officers who are detaining a cell of international terrorists in Bashkortostan, spreading the idea of creating a world caliphate. 8 detainees were preaching among Muslims. The ideology of a terrorist organization banned in Russia, and during underground meetings they recruited others into their ranks. But lately, such materials have been appearing more and more frequently on Russian TV. And the key points in them are that the FSB has reported an increase in the threat of terrorist attacks inside the country.
From time to time in Russia, a target for anger is created. Most of the time, it's always some external force. But from time to time, there arises a need to start stirring up the situation.
Russian security services are recording a rise in Islamic terrorism in Russia. According to media reports, such a report was received by the head of the FSB, Alexander Bortnikov. But it has not yet been passed on to the Russian dictator Putin. However, according to other sources, the document may in fact have ended up on Putin's desk after all. And interestingly, among the key threats is also the increased activity of certain sabotage groups within the country, that is, far from the so-called special military operation zone, including in the capital itself, Moscow. And another important point concerns the threat of destabilization in the Caucasus.
Actions that demonstrated the strength of the state. There are enemies and they will deal with them. This is the strong Putin, and yet more enemies who want to attack the besieged fortress. And
here we return to the previously mentioned information about the arrests in Bashkortostan, where according to the FSB they managed to catch 8 members of a terrorist organization. At that time, it was also reported that the group was preparing active operations on Russian territory. The sources who provided this information, the media agree that in 2026, the situation could get worse if the FSB and other agencies do not make this vector a priority. But here it's important to remember that such messages are not just reported in Russia for no reason. These are well-planned provocations. Such terrorist attacks can also actually be organized by Russian special services, since this serves both internal and external audiences. For Russians themselves, it's simply destabilizing the situation.
These statements will definitely be followed by terrorist attacks. There will definitely be, or more accurately, most likely, people detained or killed who will have certain documents or affiliations with one or another terrorist organization or some national background. This will be sold to the domestic audience. This is how Russians have always been frightened.
We all remember this very well. The terrorist attack at Crocus, which Putin used to accuse the so-called neo-Nazi Kiev regime.
On the coordinator's orders, after committing the crime, the terrorists drove towards the Russian-Ukrainian border in a car, intending to reach Kiev to receive the promised reward.
It's a rather complicated narrative. As far as I understand, there were initial reports from the FSB that FSB-affiliated Telegram channels claimed that there was some kind of cache where weapons were stored, supposedly prepared for these 4 people so they could take the weapons. At least that's the idea, as I understand it, and then break through towards Ukraine with them. No evidence whatsoever. So far, we haven't seen any proof that this cache exists.
In the end, this tragedy became a tool for mobilizing society and a push for a new wave of signing volunteer contracts with the Russian Ministry of Death. But for the external audience, creating a fake is not so easy. First and foremost, because it would have to be linked to Ukraine again. And that's exactly what's critically important for the Kremlin right now.
If this is used in the Ukraine case, if, for example, they find Budanov's business card again, so to speak, then it won't be sold internally. It will be sold most likely outside the United States. Look, they're playing by the rules of war.
Other experts are saying the same thing.
A whole series of activities from the FSB. This is preparation for terrorist attacks both in Russia and in Ukraine. In Ukraine, the goal is to demoralize society against the backdrop of scandals, power outages, and the situation at the front. In Russia, it's to stir up the population in order to justify a new wave of mobilization.
Simply put, the Russian ruling regime is quite capable of staging a series of terrorist attacks within the country itself, then blaming everything on Ukraine and trying to use that as leverage in negotiations. Or to completely intimidate the Russian people and drive them into total mobilization. Right now, the people have risen up against Putin. There is no more fear. The underground resistance is coming alive against the Kremlin regime. Humiliations, political prisoners, hidden losses in the special military operation. People are learning the truth. Fear disappears, and in its place bursts a storm of rage. The Moscow elites are panicking. The awakening of Russians has already begun. A terrifying force is heading for Moscow. This can no longer be stopped. Shocking details in our report. Bashkortostan is protesting. In the Russian dictatorship, it is becoming increasingly difficult to manipulate the peoples within the country. And the thing is, not so long ago, cultural institutions in Bashkortostan held an event for Bashkir Language Day. But the Bashkirs decided to use this moment for protests. The posters featured anti-imperial slogans and also mentioned political prisoners.
The Republic of Bashkortostan in this regard and its national movement. The Bashkir movement is probably one of the most active today in the Russian Federation.
On the official websites and social media pages of clubs and libraries, posters, photos, and texts in the Bashkir language were published. They talk about how empires have historically forced conquered peoples to switch to the dominant language, depriving them of political will and the ability to act in their own interests.
Throughout history, many empires have forced conquered peoples to adopt their language because they understood that a native language strengthens national identity and unity, which in turn makes it harder to forcibly impose an outside will and gives people the ability to act in their own interests. Those who changed the language also tried to change the very essence of the people.
A number of publications also mention historical figures who fought for the autonomy and independence of Bashkortostan.
The Bashkirs have always been good warriors. Bashkiria, let me remind you, is historically described and formulated by the Russian authorities as the voluntary joining of Bashkiria, including to the Russian state, the so-called Russian Empire. However, all of this happened by fire and sword.
Interestingly, sources from the Not Moscow resource in Bashkortostan suggest that this action is a prank, since something similar has happened before. In particular, at the end of November, memorial events using the number 8,000 were held in the Republic.
At that time, state institutions published materials with the hashtag 8,000 heroes, in which it was claimed that Bashkortostan had lost more than 8,000 people during the war in Ukraine. At the same time, the authorities of the Republic have not officially announced such figures.
But there are more serious threats for Russia. Recently, the Bashkir partisan movement has been actively developing.
Kurdan. I represent the underground of the Bashkort company. I am the voice of the Bashkirs and I am ready to speak for myself. My ancestors fought for freedom and I am ready to see it through to the end. Bashkiria will be free. Become part of the Bashkort company.
The number of members in this company is rapidly growing. Bashkort. The Bashkort company itself is a military unit of the International Legion of Ukraine's Territorial Defense, formed from Bashkir volunteers in 2022. And now more and more videos are appearing calling people to join their ranks.
Bashkirs unite. The underground is growing.
More and more Russian cities are being decorated with inscriptions in the name of Bashkort Company Field.
Putin's Russian regime. He is trying his very best to actively suppress these significant national liberation movements. And actually, if you look at the resulting human and material losses, the proportions of the peoples who inhabit the Russian Federation, who suffers the most today from being sent as so-called fighters to the so-called special military operation, it's the small ethnic groups, including the Bashkirs. And in my opinion, this is being done deliberately.
No one wants to die in a war against another sovereign state. And no one understands this better than the Bashkort Company, which continues to fight against the Kremlin's bloody dictatorship.
The collapse of the Russian Federation, which is inevitable for any empire, I'm not saying it will happen tomorrow, but it will begin precisely in the so-called national republics.
And apparently they intend to intensify this struggle. And for Vladimir Putin's authoritarian regime, this development represents exceptionally dire and profoundly unsettling news, signaling potentially significant and far-reaching negative consequences that could undermine its stability and influence.